Here we go. All right, greetings everyone. Welcome to Terra Prime Live, a little special show, a little discussion here. We wanted to come out. We do have our show coming out May 4th, so join us for that. We're going to have Charlie Cummings from TSL, Saber Legion, Kyle Vaz from Key Sabers, and our friend Darth Alice, Master Sabersmith Extraordinaire. But today, I am here with Jared and Damon, and we are going to talk about something. We've gotten a lot of stuff. We've gotten a lot of pings over the years over it, and we haven't necessarily breached it yet. But Teras, now that we've kind of seen it kind of showing up in canon, as in the Solo movie and all of that. At least it's just mentioned, so it exists now outside of the thing. So we are here to announce that we are on the project of recreating Teras or actually bringing it to life somehow. So that's what we're gonna go over here tonight. There. If you don't know what we're talking about yet, I'll just go through it real quick before we begin. Teras Kasi is kind of like the martial art outside of the Jedi arts now, usually considered maybe barehanded or non-lightsaber based, something like that. So people like Darth Maul are said to have practiced it. Anytime you do anything, dirty, in a sword fight, grabbing stuff and all that kind of thing, that seems to be what gets lumped in there. But of course, we want to add some more depth to it. So yes, it's going to kind of start on a barehanded thing. This will allow us to get into different weapons like daggers and spears and cudgels and all kinds of neat stuff. So there we go. Now you may be asking, why are we three specifically coming to talk to you about this? And that is because of our background in barehanded traditional martial arts. I'll go through my thing and I'll just hand it over to you guys, and we can kind of share our pedigrees a little bit so they figure out where we're coming from. I'm generally from a Chinese background. Obviously, if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you'll probably know that. I'm a disciple student of Ma Yu, who is the son of Ma Xinda, the teacher of Jet Li and all those Wushu greats and all of that. I come from that background of Tongbei, which is a very expansive traditional style with some military links to it and all of that kind of thing. I also do Tai Chi and Bagua, who I learned from Gabriel Chin, my first teacher or whatever. And all of that being done in a very, very traditional way. Why don't I throw it over to you, Damon, and you can go about your background.
Cool. Well, I got my start when I was like 11 in Danzan-ryu Jiu-Jitsu, and I studied that for a good decade. And that was at the Medford Judo Academy, which we sadly lost in the Oregon fires last year. So that's been a dojo there for over 60 years. It's a staple on the West Coast. Anyways, that being said, I also studied some Kempo karate under Michael Boyce, and so that was all just Oregon stuff. And then I got into capoeira, and then that capoeira eventually led me to Daising Pakwamun, into monkey kung fu when I studied with Paulie, and that led me to the opera, and then that led me to Hujin Chong and Yu Chung Hoi and all the rest of it. So it was kind of a mixed bag in the beginning, but I found everything filtered through the dicing style once it spoke to me, you could say. And so even though I've studied all those other arts, they all go through the filter of the dicing pekwa.
Right, which is the monkey
style, yeah.
Yep. All right, Jared, why don't you chime in here?
Let's see. So I grew up in the American Midwest, which means I mastered Taekwondo to yellow belt at the age of 12, as did everyone where I'm from. I spent most of my adolescence doing Japanese jiu-jitsu, and was 6 years in the Bujinkan went to Japan as a teenager, studied with Mr. Hatsumi there, which lends a great deal of color to my background, which is a separate discussion. Let's see. So I studied the Shinkage style of Japanese classical martial arts, Koryu, which is mostly known for sword, but it's not really that narrow. Let's see. I had a short-lived professional fighting career. Fought out of the KTT gym in Yamanashi, which is somewhat of a notorious or infamous, I suppose, location. Has a lot of history to it. Let's see. I spent a little while in Qingdao studying Meifa Tonglongchuan, the plum blossom praying mantis style. Picked up Bagua and Qingyi and Taiji along the way, somewhere in there. Yeah, and then I have a sundry background in other, mostly Japanese martial arts, as well as more modern, grappling, boxing, kickboxing, stuff like that.
Yeah. I haven't had. Go ahead.
I think that's one thing that can be said about anyone who has probably 20 years, even maybe 15 years of experience or more. I know I've been practicing since I was 11, and so that makes it 30 some odd years now. We come into contact with things just because that's just our nature when we're traveling and discovering. It's like, what's the term? Musha Shugyo, like a warrior pilgrimage, like you're going, and that's just part of the deal. And I find, and maybe this is part of our discussion, it's hard to really define what you do when you're when you have experience, and especially when you're open to sharing and dialogue. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm multi-style," because it's like categorized, but it's just so much more than that. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, top ramen, dude. Like, what flavor are you?
Right. Well, that's why I always say background, right?
Yeah.
Like, here's a good background. What's going on? What's going on kind of behind the scenes? Because you're totally right. And that will lead right into what we're talking about here. Because, at the end of the day, and we've talked about this, all martial arts are going for the same goal, right? And, probably at their highest level, you're not going to see a lot of difference between any of these things, especially if you're looking at like fighters, right? Like, especially like MMA fighting and stuff like that. Fighting is fighting. And you're going to see maybe a little tricks here or there, or whatever, but it's generally, I mean, I've seen a lot of fights in my years and it all looks like a fight to me. No matter who's going at it.
Well, and that does bring up a good point that you're both you've both touched on, but folks are going to be wondering, why would we take up this project? And it's, as you both pointed to, there is a segment of humanity, the three of us included. This is how we relate to people. There's this term physical culture that we don't really use much anymore in English, but it's a way of thinking and communicating. We are a subgroup of people who think as much with our bodies as with our brains, and we connect with other human beings as much with our bodies as with our brains.
Absolutely, Jared. It's an embodied knowledge,
right?
And and I've always thought as martial arts, as I'm sure all of us have thought of it, as a language. And you have your letters and your numbers and your grammar, and like when you meet someone and you're going to exchange knowledge, whether it's a good discussion or a heated discussion, you're only, it depends on what kind of vocabulary you want to talk with. And you show up with that.
Right. Well, I when I'm trying to describe, what like the like lightsaber fencing should be like, right? It's just like, think of it as a conversation, right? You're not necessarily trying to overpower the other person. You may be debating and you're both trying to prove your point, but there's a back and forth, in that way.
I think that's why I was never really drawn to wanting to get into professional fighting, because I never really wanted to win. Like, I didn't care. Like, I wanted to feel the technique of the person I was with.
Yes.
And I wanted to have a conversation with that. I wasn't interested in trying to be the most powerful or the best or something like that.
Right.
And I guess that's just my personal path with it.
Oh no, I agree. I mean, I experimented with going into fighting, but I think I was a little old and I sprained my ankle in training, and that derailed that plan.
See,
You
that's how you know you're a smart man.
But, I've had a lot of friends who have been fighters, and I like going with them and supporting them there. And I'm
Oh yeah,
good in the corner, and
and I love sparring with my fighter friends.
yeah,
You're never
I
going to get
learn
a
a
better
lot.
sparring partner.
I learn a lot, even if I come away bruised and battered and
Yeah,
not feeling too hot. And and I think there's an importance with that, but there's also an importance that if you really want to be a fighter, just really be a damn good one.
mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah,
that's the thing, right? Is
Yeah.
when you go into fighting at a certain, not even at a certain level, because you'll meet gym fighters who are way better than anybody you've seen on TV, who will never step in a ring or a cage or anything. Um, but when you approach it from a certain trajectory where it becomes a professional endeavor, then it really narrows your practice and your scope of understanding, and therefore what you get out of it. When we talk about what we love about the martial arts, and especially lightsaber stuff, and the good master Anonymous and I were briefly chatting about this on in the messages the other day. If you enjoy the act of what you're doing, regardless of what it is, if you enjoy cooking rather than create, like, having that product on the table, but the act thereof, that's how you're going to progress and get more out of it as a human being.
Oh, right. The painter can have good kung fu.
mm-hmm.
The cook can
Exactly.
have good kung fu, right? And you're right. There are a lot of people that are just incredible fighters or vets that have had military training that can, and it all depends on your temperament. It's all of those, I think, and this, I think, comes into our Teras thing, because we're going to find people that are going to want to approach different hand-to-hand things based on those things
Right.
that we're talking about.
Exactly.
And I think that whole spectrum needs to be honored and important in these discussions.
Yeah,
that's my thought.
My first teacher he didn't ever use the word Kung Fu, because to him, he was an older guy and he was from Shandong. So for him, Kung Fu just meant like any type of skill, right? So,
Kung Fu Cha.
Right, exactly. You'd just be like, he would say it, but he would say it in that sense, good Kung Fu, but Wushu, Da Chuan was fighting to him, so
it's maybe one of the few good moments in that awful recreated version of Karate Kid with Will Smith's son, where Jackie Chan grabs him and says, "Everything is kung fu."
Right. Yes.
I like watching old man Jackie move. Man,
oh, he was great.
Inspiration, dude, because it's like I'm getting up there. I'm 47 this year, and I'm like, you know what? He's still doing something, and it's just like, yeah, man.
Oh my God! And after quarantine, I am going to have a long road ahead of me. I tell you.
Yeah, I hear that.
But so this is where we're coming from. My actual style, Matsu Tongbei, kind of goes for this particular specific thing. Tongbei means through cultivation, so it kind of means covering all of your bases, even though you may only be operating in one area, right? So I guess we can go about, I'll just go through here. What we know about Teras Kasi in canon is not much. Like right now, the actual official canon stuff, not the legend stuff, it's just been mentioned in Solo Star Wars Story, I guess in the video game, Shadows of the Empire, all of that kind of thing. But it hasn't been given a whole lot of definition.
I'm going to check something real quick. I'll be right back. I got an idea.
So it's to illustrate the situation for people who have never tried to take on an endeavor like this before. It's one thing to train in something like, the TSL system or the TPLA system or, the Tongbei system or anything. It's very different to have to systematize and organize and think this out logically so that you are cultivating like a complete trainee, in every aspect. So when Master Anonymous is talking about looking at the evidence that we have and the material to work with, it's not even reconstructing a crime scene. It's reconstructing a crime scene as an archaeologist, where
Right.
all you have is like a toe bone and some scrapings on a log, and you're trying to figure out what happened here.
Well,
Right.
if I remember right, Teras, right? That's Finnish,
Right?
Mhm.
Iron
right? And
hand,
it's
but
yeah,
not
iron
grammatically
hand.
correct.
And so again, it's coming
Right.
back to the hand. You know,
Right.
that's pretty Masoyama iron hand.
The god hand.
Here
I
come bull, bam.
I think it's actually, if you take the umlauts out of it or whatever, and of course we're kind of like rebranding ours as Terra Akasi, but
Oh, right.
we don't want to get in trouble.
using the hand as a metaphor for action is, I think it's a universal metaphor.
Yeah, even in Conan, the rhythm of steel with who is that the sword without the hand that wields it.
Yes. So,
But
I
it
would
ends
think
up-
that
from
it's
all
steel
sources.
hand because it's tempering and conditioning. It doesn't have to be a fist. It can be open.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like how that project you started with all the different hand shapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure. Well, it's I'm trying to remember what the Chen style of Bagua calls a fist. It's like a curled palm, something like that.
I didn't know that.
So yeah, there's the wrapped palm or the ginger fist, where you're like, "Ugh."
I'm thinking of it's because the idea is that everything is a palm. No, even if it's closed, it's still a palm.
Oh, right.
Oh, cool. I see that.
Yeah,
I'll
That
need to
was
check
very
on
hard.
what the phrase is, but it's the characters are like wrapped palm, which
yeah.
I find pretty intriguing. So we have this evidence, right? What little there is of it. And so what is our methodology? How are we approaching it?
Well, in Legends, we've got the only actual framework or hint of anything like that whatsoever called the 9 Edicts. They
Right.
are not spelled out. We do not know what the 9 Edicts is, but somehow in the Legends stuff, there is the idea that there are basically 9 commandments of some probably philosophical in nature, to deal with stuff. So that being the only real concrete thing, I've kind of latched onto that, right? But as we're talking about it, one of the things other than this type of evidence is like, what is really the purpose of this, right? Obviously, it's introduced as being like to be used against Jedi.
Mhm.
That makes me really think of like there has to be more to Teras Kazi than just open hand stuff. And it's like it
Precisely.
also makes me think like, okay, well, I keep thinking about I have my titanium staff over here. And I keep thinking how much that would wreck a sword. I mean, that would wreck a sword. That would wreck any kind of blade. And I'm thinking like, well, okay, what if that was a lightsaber and this was like some sort of super metal that whips out takes the lightsaber out, like knives, gloves, all those kind of things. There had to be, in my mind, when I think about it, there had to be some people that were just so fed up with this lightsaber stuff that
Absolutely.
they just wanted to deal with it.
Well, and it's not just the lightsaber stuff, remember, because Jedi have force powers as well.
Yeah.
So you have to find some way to get over this. Now, I know we've talked about this before. It's not an insurmountable. Some people think it's an insurmountable challenge, right? Oh, they have force powers, they have super speed and super strength, but they don't have it all the time. They're not like Superman, right? It takes some manner of concentration on their part to, even a force push. We know that it's a localized amount of force because when they push somebody, the people around them don't move, right? None of the scenery moves, right? There's no big dust cloud, right? So there's stuff that you can work with in there,
And also every Jedi has their specific stuff. Someone might be a great saber fighter, but their force skills might be just like the worst. The only thing they can pick up is a pebble, but they might be able to slay with a saber and vice versa.
Right. And of course, the most dangerous of all of the Jedi weapons, the Jedi mind trick, right? So you have to have, all of this stuff covered. You have to protect your mind. You have to protect everything.
Jared.
Yeah, right. Oh my God.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
Right.
That's hilarious.
Right. So there's got to be, but we know even in any of the stuff like Clone Wars or whatever, you can resist Jedi mind tricks. Like Cad Bane, it took 3 Jedi to pry like this tiny little piece of information out of him.
Mm-hmm.
Consider what Obi-Wan says. The Force can have a powerful influence on the weak-minded. So if you train to not be weak-minded, right? So you're physically training the entire person, and you're mentally and spiritually, if you want to use that term, not that TPLA has any religious affiliation whatsoever,
right?
Training the entire person, right, to develop a complete fighter, then it is conceivable that the Jedi, we know they're mortal, right? Maybe I killed a Jedi and took it from him, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that they're mortal, therefore they can be beaten, and the Mandalorians have proven that.
Right. And that's the other thing too. You have a lot, if you look at the Mandalorians, you have a lot of apparatus that you have to fight them too. We finally saw Beskar armor being used against a lightsaber. Right.
Use that gauntlet.
Yep. The gauntlet, everything. And and we see it used against blaster bolts. So Beskar is one substance. We know cortosis is somewhere in
cortosis shuts down sabers, if I remember right.
So cortosis is something that shorts out the saber. Right.
My character, General Sun, when you look at old pictures, he has shuriken, and those shuriken were made out of cortosis. I was a little crazy.
Guy's one of my favorite Jedi.
Yeah, so it's like I would General Sun would throw the cortosis shuriken, and the Sith would block it and knock their lightsabers out, and then he would just go to town on them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like that was just something I thought of just because I have my old shuriken laying around. I thought I'd just put them on. And but there has to be a little bit of truth in that, like get some cortosis batarang on those people.
Well, precisely. And also there's this. We know that although lightsabers can cut through almost anything, right? They can't cut through everything the same. There are some things that it goes through slower than others. So there are things that will resist it, even if they can't fully resist it. So
it took Qui-Gon how many minutes?
Regular Durasteel plate armor on would give you one layer of protection. You could at least go get that burned and drop it off or something.
And we know that the Jedi were.
I'm sorry, Jared. Go ahead, please.
I was just thinking of. Just watch the first 10 minutes of The Phantom Menace, and you'll see at least 3 different things that scared Jedi. Right? Droideka, a door that's really thick, someone who can't be influenced because he doesn't have a brain. The Jedi actually have a fairly narrow scope of abilities. They've just bamboozled the galaxy into thinking that they're supernatural.
Oh, they're good. They're good at capitalizing on that. And another thing I thought about with those gauntlets, especially coming back to Teras, all those long arm styles we have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, it's like you can just do a lot, like all those forearm chops. And
my own style makes extensive use of that, as we've talked about a little bit in the past.
Yeah, like Piqua. My style of Piqua is ostensibly about moving around in some manner of armor, and using forearms to hit things. And we saw that also in Mandalorian, like when they're in the Gamorrean arena.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And they have the fight. He's doing a bunch of things. There's one time the guy goes to punch him, and he just leans his head in, and has him hit his helmet. And there's boom, because it's like basically putting a bowling ball up in front of somebody's fist.
Yeah, and I think one of the great fight scenes in that, if we bring it back to, well, they weren't both Force users, was when Moff Gideon was using that dark saber on him, and he was using that staff, and then how about Ahsoka going to town on that? Yeah. Well,
that I think was a really great example of where I'm thinking of one way, Teras Kasi is being used. Is you're not necessarily, and this is how I've I will be releasing our 9 edicts in a bit, but they're basically set up like you have your body, you have your mind, and you have your, basically your, what you said, your spirit or your essence, your energy, right? So there's, you want to keep your body there, but there's lots of stuff you can use. And in that little fight sequence between him and Ahsoka, blocks with the gauntlet, right? Does the flamethrower to get her to move back, right? Quickly, tries to tie her up with the line, she jumps over, all that kind of stuff. So it was really,
All right, I'm going to open up a can of worms. What about those Knights of Ren cats in that red armor?
well, they weren't the Knights of Ren. The red armor guys were the
weapons of Shaolin Kung Fu put in Star Wars kind of badly.
No,
Sega style.
No, you're talking about the Praetorian Guards.
Yeah.
Oh, Praetorian Guards. Yeah, I guess those are the
Yeah. They have Pudao and that kind of shit.
Yeah, chain whips and shit. I'm like, what? Okay.
Well, I'm not even. They actually have the Pudao I have. They just put like
It's
glitter
space,
on it.
space Pudao.
It's a space Pudao, right? You covered up the dragon head and put like some like what do you call them? Like little doodads.
Buddha in space.
Yes.
So I don't know how I felt about that, to tell you the truth. I watched it and I was like, okay.
I like it because I think especially Chinese weapons, lend themselves to sci-fi weapons very well. Look at the ones in the back here.
True.
Right? I mean, people just assume those are made up.
That's a good point. I think a lot of people who don't see that, they don't realize that they actually, all of those weapons that they use came from something.
Right.
Even that like laser tonfa them stormtroopers had or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although their chain whips were way cooler because they could
solidify.
Yeah, solidify into a staff, so you could.
I remember there was some like weapon like that in a really kind of B movie called Brotherhood of the Wolf back in the day.
Love Brotherhood of the Wolf. Mark Dacascos is awesome.
That's right. Yeah, Mark Dacascos and Monica Bellucci was in that, and her husband at the time, right? And her husband's a pretty skillful capoeirista today, if I remember right, from Oceans, whatever that was, and he's dancing through them lasers, doing the capoeira. That guy's pretty tight. Not to diverge, but it's just like, I mean,
it's there's a whole gamut of stuff that can be used here. Your environment, all this stuff, high ground, all that bullshit. Pardon my French.
So the reason this ends up being important for us in our real world mission in TPLA is that even doing both forms and competition, lightsaber is still a somewhat narrow field of focus, and since our goal is to develop the whole individual, this gives you a chance to interact more with your worlds, behave, and train yourself outside of that particular context, in moving in different modalities, so that you don't end up a giant ball of scar tissue like the three of us.
Right. And it also gives people who are interested in joining the organization, they don't necessarily have to be Jedi.
Right.
They can like be like, wow, let's say you get someone who's like a really skilled hand-to-hand practitioner. Maybe they're really good at Muay Thai or boxing or anything out there. And they're like, you know what? I just really want to do this. And I want to go into fight choreography against you guys or dialogue with you guys somewhere. And it opens up a whole door for hand-to-hand practitioners that are serious about that to be dorks like us.
Exactly.
I think it will also give a good bridge, right? It will give a good bridge between people who are coming from barehanded styles. And even nowadays, like barehanded styles that have weapons in them, they're not using the weapons as weapons. They're kind of just using them as apparatus. And having the system where you have both of these things in the same milieu, you can finally see, okay, where do they overlap? Where don't they overlap? Well,
then we have those special kind of Jedi that have serious, and all of them were skilled martial artist actors, of course, like, Ray Park, Darth Maul. That guy's hand-to-hand skills are cool. Oh, Donnie Yen. Playing the Wills dude.
Jared,
so it's, there's a crossover there with a relationship with the Force and hand-to-hand combat.
And in Solo, what's her name? Kira.
Kira, yeah.
Yeah, she mentions that it was taught to her by Vision. But
yeah, I know, right? Oh, Vision taught Daenerys Targaryen.
Yeah. So like and that weapon that he uses is I mean, it's very similar to like a lightsaber-ish deer horn knife or something like that.
Oh man, I got to go back and check that out. I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, there's even there's a cut scene you can see. I think it's on the DVD release where he's turning in a circle with, I think it's palm number 2, and I'm like, it's really obvious what they're doing.
Interesting.
And it makes sense because nobody on this planet moves like people in Bagua. Who does that? Spinning in circles and stuff.
Yeah, I haven't seen that Outlaw, but I thought what they did really nicely with Kira is when they had her beat up the guard or whatever, it happened off camera. Right? It's like, and she says, "What's that?" Teras Kasi. Right on. Blank slate. You know. All right, there we go.
It's like the old in the old serials when the femme fatale would go off camera and psh, 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 and then some guy flies. What happened? Kung fu.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, it's the idea with Teras Kasi, I think, is probably more to the point of not just Jedi, but how do you deal when you are outmatched, right? Does the other person have a weapon and you are unarmed? Do you have a weapon, but they have a long range weapon, you have a short range weapon? How do you start from behind and still come out ahead?
That's true, because it's like so many times, especially in the prequels, Obi-Wan or any Jedi's like, you can't lose the lightsaber. This is your life. And I'm just like, wow, that's a lot of attachment to that thing.
Yeah.
And
there was an old thing that they were trying to do back in the early days of wushu when they're putting it together in China. And I heard this story from Wu Hai, the Mantis guy. They were playing around with, I think I might have mentioned this before, doing traditional forms using household objects, like frying
that's awesome. Oh my God!
Because they were like, well, what good is this sword? Nobody uses a sword anymore. So they would take sword forms and transplant them to umbrellas. And
well, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't Choi Li Fut have a chopstick bowl, rice bowl form? Am I crazy?
No. If not, we should definitely invent some sort of eating utensil.
I think I heard some. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that somewhere that there is a chopstick and bowl form, and then you see these kung fu cats fighting with benches and stuff in movies all the time.
Well, the bench thing is real. I mean, the bench thing is from most of those Southern styles, like Kung Ga and all that.
Right. Yeah, I've seen a couple of people back in the day when I was a kid and I didn't know what I was looking at. People doing bench forms in San Francisco.
They were talking about doing stuff with like 2x4s, like stuff you just pick up.
Man, it's like Seven Samurai woodcut style.
It sounded insane. I was like, I want to see some of that.
That's awesome, dude.
I would love to see somebody doing a cool wushu form.
Champions Jackie Chan ability to fight with a ladder and stuff. I mean, it's like, it's so there's this guy on TikTok. He's a dad. I can't remember his name, but his daughter takes pictures of him doing household chores, and he was a Beijing wushu athlete. He's very, very good, but he's like gardening the thing. And I'm going to post him because he is just an amazing wushu athlete, and he has a great sense of humor, and also he's just really great to watch. And he's doing all of this, like he's like, when he should mop and he's doing spear technique and stuff. It's like that's awesome, So
it was like the metalhead home improvement guy,
right?
Where
so there's a psychological term called functional fixedness that is actually a problem for most people, where if you see a hammer, you only can think of it in a very particular way.
Right.
So learning to engage with your surroundings like that is I mean, it's good for fighting and kung fu, but it's also just good for life. It
Mhm.
helps you solve problems in unique and interesting ways.
Those
Yeah.
people need to watch Old Boy.
Well, that's a good example of something, especially with lightsabers, right? Um, this happens all the time when I'm playing around with people or whatever, because when you're holding that lightsaber, even if it's just a sword, a lot of times when people hold on a sword, they are fixated on that sword, and they don't think they can do anything else except do stuff with that sword, right? But you still have another hand, you still have legs, you still have all of this stuff to use.
Mhm.
You know, when you've got a glowing sword in front of you, right? That becomes another fix it. But see, that's one of those cognitive biases that we all kind of share. That's the kind of stuff that Teras in that mind and energetic section of it would try to attack, right? We would try to figure out these, if they're holding a lightsaber, they're probably pretty fixated on that lightsaber if they got it out, And if you notice, they don't do a lot of the force stuff while they're lightsaber fighting. The lightsaber fight, stop, do some force stuff, Every now and then, like Luke did some stuff, but a lot of that's just pushing people away.
Especially when they're not armed with other lightsabers. It seems like
Right.
when Jedi and Sith come together, they get concentrated on that, except for that fight scene, that remake of fight scene 38 between Vader and old Obi-Wan. I'm sure you've seen that remake.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
When you got like Vader backfisting old Obi-Wan now, and like looking at the ground, I'm just like, yep, that guy's mad as shit.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the use of everything that they had with that, and I thought that was real right on. And it was nice to see that level of visceralness with the put next to the like civilized lightsaber for civilized age.
Yes. Well, there's also the idea that and it was, I don't know if it was floated around in any of the movies. It might have been floated around in the Clone Wars. I read it in one of those DK books or whatever, that at the opening of Phantom Menace, the Jedi had been, for at least 500 years unopposed, right? They're not
Victory
fighting
has defeated
lightsabers.
you,
They're not
Batman.
fighting nobody with force powers. They're just, they're just going on. So that when Darth Maul does show up, they're like, wait, what the hell do we do?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So, I think when, I don't know if they'll ever expand on the whole Mandalorian Jedi Wars, but the Mandalorians have to have some tricks, right? And when you're talking about that food, the eating implements or whatever, think about how many fights in Mandalorian happened in bars and restaurants.
No kidding.
That's some useful skill. Chairs, tables, forks, knives, those tubes that put the gruel in your the octopus gruel in your.
I think about it a lot. I mean, it's just, I think all of us, when we get to a point, whether we have a hyper military type of training or we just come to an awareness, we look around the room and know what we can use.
Right.
And we know where we can go to and how we can get out of there if we have to, and also know where we need to push an opponent. I think that's just a natural thing that happens through the cultivation of martial arts to any degree, depending on how that person wants to really engage that kind of thinking, that strategic thinking, But there was a time in my life, especially when I was a angry young man, where, when I walked into a room, the first thing I looked at was natural weapons, potential exits, and potential threats. And I think we all go through that mindset.
Yeah. A lot of times, especially if we're trained in martial arts or something like that, you get you get that put into you. I should say this: as long as you know, if you fight, and you get into it, because there's if you're like if you're going to Tai Chi class every other week or whatever, you're probably not going to have that happen to you.
Go home and be a family man.
Yes, right. You're probably looking for something a little less anxiety inducing.
Yeah,
So-
get it, right?
So here's the other question then is, folks are going to come in with previous martial arts experience, and they've been through this whole Jason Bourne phase, and that, they know how to think about this. What about people who are coming to this type of training for the first time? What are the benefits of doing something like Teras instead of signing up at the local, I don't know, jiu-jitsu academy, since that's the cool thing right now? What can be offered by this sort of a system that would be beneficial in some way you're not going to get somewhere else?
That's a good question.
You got lots of. First of all, it's an open system, right?
You told me
You bring you
use
can
any
bring
technique that warrants.
What?
Keep an open mind.
He's doing it.
myself to
Frank
one
Dukes.
Yeah. But so it's not like there's nothing set. There is no Teras, right? So you are free from all burden of saying, oh, you must do this because our ancestors have done it this way, and you'll bring shame to the lineage. There is no lineage, there's no whatever. Do what you want.
I think people that come to us with that, even if they have nothing, we're probably going to encourage them to go study something.
Yes.
We're going to look at their makeup and be like, wow, you know what? You can really jump really high. Maybe you should go learn some Taekwondo or something, or you learn some Wushu or something, or something athletic. It's like, wow, man, you got thunder legs. Why don't you go learn some Muay Thai? Like,
right.
Or like, you're small and really fast. Why don't you go learn some ninja action or some Wing Chun? We're going to guide them on a martial path. However, they're going to come to us and ask probably creative existential questions that maybe their teachers aren't ready or are unable to answer.
I mean, that's one of the things I really love about the TPLA, not even system, but just conceptually, is not being bound by dogma and tradition, right? So, we may come up with forms or concepts, or, we're going to have the 9 edicts, and that's going to guide the way that we carry out Teras. But at the end of the day, you don't have some narrative of like, we do this and that, and we don't do this and that, and this is, sort of brainwashing people into behaving a way that is not necessarily going to serve them in daily life.
Yeah, it's not automaton training. It's like when I think of any type of rules that I go back to, it's always Musashi's principles. And I never once have seen him say develop, like, go to this style. He's like, the way is in training. No loss and gain in the world. It's like they're broad, beautiful concepts. And that if you're dedicated to it, just practice.
And I've never heard a martial arts adage that says choose one style over the other. Mm-hmm. I've heard lots of adages which say that styles don't really exist, right? Like there are no styles in the Lei Tai, and
Or what's the old General Chi Ji Guan, who was just like, all styles in themselves are incomplete.
Yeah, I think you might have been specifically talking about the stuff that he collected there. But it could very well be, because back in the day, that's probably martial arts systems were probably far more specialized than we do them.
And even if you're unspecialized and you're a generalist, that itself is, it's different if you get in, and I brought this up before, when you get in a ring and fight, or when you're dropped in a forest and you have to survive for 24 hours.
Right.
There's a different mindset in the warrior that does that. And both are absolutely correct and a path that one should follow if they so choose. As is, kind of, any, unless you're just like a mean person, I guess. You don't want to be I don't
Well,
like
then
mean
you're
people.
not following the way at all.
Yeah, it's true.
But no,
But
you're right. Jack of all trades, master of none is oftentimes better than master of one.
Right. Being competent in several things can often help you. It all depends on your particular thing. Like if you're getting into teaching, like if you like teaching, you like this, then learn as much as you can, right? Even if you're not going to do it, even if you're not going to master it, because you may have a student who can, right?
absolutely, that's really good. It's like
I teach
training
my
your colleagues.
students, my young students, all kinds of stuff that I can't physically do anymore. My teacher, Gabriel was way old and he taught me like all my falling and stuff like that. He couldn't do any of it, so
It's like the same when learning with Polly. It's like, you know what? I've never had a propensity for the monkey staff. It's never been something I've been drawn to. I mean, I do it, but I've always had a propensity for the sword and the dada. And he has mentioned that. But that doesn't mean I can't pass on what I know about that to someone, like who I taught Tyler, like Michael Boyce's son, Tyler Boyce. His staff technique is very, very good. And I'm glad that he knows it because it's not lost. It's I think the mistake is what happens is people try to be everything rather than just like knowing what you have and what you can pass on and what your special seasoning is.
Yeah.
I once asked my when I realized that my body was not going to be suitable for for the profession of taking blows to the head. I thought about coaching for a while, and so I asked my trainer, my boxing trainer, the great Toshi Naito, how do you become a good coach? And he thought about it for a second, and he said, "Watch a lot of fights."
Yeah.
Is that it? That's it.
Yeah. Yep. Learn the game. You're dealing with a game which has specific strategies and things that are high percentage and low percentage, and you got to know all of those things. You don't have to do them all, right? Like my dad was the Michigan tennis coach for I don't know how many years. He taught Malavia Washington. Do you think he could actually beat Malavia Washington in a tennis match? No, right? But
it's like, okay, so this gets all out there, but it's like that film, The Legend of Bagger Vance. Right? That's based off the Bhagavad Gita. Believe it or not. And the caddy is, I mean, Will Smith's Krishna, dude.
Oh, is he?
And he shows up to teach Arjun or whatever that guy's name is, Matt Damon, Arjuna. And it comes back to the mentor. This is way getting off subject, but I think the process of mentor-mentee relationships is important. And I also think the relationship of the art and with the inner guru is important. You get to a point where the way begins to unfold things that you practice, but that doesn't mean just because your practice is showing you insights, that doesn't mean that you don't have colleagues or teachers or mentors that you don't bounce ideas off of. That would just be pure arrogance.
Yeah. Everybody's got areas that they're good at, that they're less good at, but if you have a body of knowledge and you're good at communicating that, then yeah, that's a valuable thing. The movie Soul really touched on this. I don't know if you saw that.
That's the movie with Jazz, correct?
Yeah, but the basic premise of it is that your calling is not always your passion. The character wanted to perform all the time, right? But it turns out that he when he finally did it, it was like, okay, that was done. Great. What now? Right. And it's basically you get more out of the teaching of it and everything like that. And that's the same thing here. But back to the Teras thing here. What we're trying to do here, and this is the question on here, does the concept being presented here surrounding Teras mean it's going to be free fighting choreography or some kind of combination paralleling the ASL FFE for competition? What this is going to be can be applied to any of those things, right? These are the systems of training that we're going to be coming up with, the kind of philosophies and all of that. We'll be able to use it in choreography. We're going to be, as Damon said, kind of like creating a language here that we can then use to communicate certain things in choreography. You can use them, in some types of sparring matches, obviously drills. They're good learning things. But for the people who are first coming in, the one thing that this is really, really great at, that is something that can be overlooked, is that it does put an emphasis on your body, right?
Mhm.
You don't have a tool. So the first thing you have to do is get your body going, and coordinating that and making that strong, healthy, and moving well is going to benefit everything else coming down the line. So,
And I think with this, I really want to invite all those sci-fi nerds and geeks that are really good hand-to-hand fighters to give us a ring, and people who have really specialized in that. And I've known people who've done that. They only want to focus on their hands, but maybe, we can also present them a creative outlet to have dialogues with people that are going to not pass judgment on their ideas.
Right. Yeah.
And I'd be more than happy to hear from those people. I think that would be awesome.
This is going to open up a lot of things too, right? Because there's a lot of, we like to experiment with things too, right? We see something happen in the movie. Does it work in real life? Let's go try it.
Yeah, like reverse grip.
Right. Reverse grip. There you go. All
Turns out wasn't the best idea.
Exactly.
Looks cool.
Right. And that's exactly what happens. The first time you're like, okay. And then you ask your partner, so what was it? It's like, I didn't feel threatened at all. I could just hit you like that. That's fine.
We have a great deal more in common with the Dog Brothers than I think anyone realizes.
Yeah, unfortunately.
What is it? What is there saying? Like greater enlightenment through harder contact or something?
Yeah,
like
that's right.
I don't believe in the harder contact thing. I believe that martial arts is a labor-saving effort. And
we like to keep people safe and healthy.
Now that I'm 3 years to 50, I think I'm going to limit my action with that. Yeah. But if I got to, I will, I guess.
Proper safety gear and health medical protocols followed at all times.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you're right. You make a good point as far as its utility. Even if someone who's primarily interested in sabering just picks up the basic rudiments of it, this is going to be an excellent adjunct to that training to balance out your body systems as a warm up or a cool down or conditioning, depending on how you interface with it. It will allow for a nice across the spectrum of students and training modalities. It will give a little bit more uniformity to, we're going to get ourselves ready, and even the basics will help you be better at saber.
Hey, Jared, I have a question about Aikido.
Yes, sir.
So there's a lot of rumors and legends that Sensei went to Mongolia, maybe he learned Bagua, he came back, and all the movements are based off the sword and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay.
That's all bogus.
All bogus. I love stories.
Now, see, these stories that we talk about, and we always say, yeah, that's ludicrous or whatever. This is another great thing about what we're doing here with Teras Kasi and with all this, because we get to make up these stories ourselves, right?
Yeah.
They're not true. Nobody's ever going to think that they're true, because the characters in them, instead of being like historical figures, are going to be aliens and that kind of thing, But these stories, like you're talking about, these legends and all of that kind of stuff, it has an effect. It's part of this. It's part of that whole milieu. And if you take that out of it, I think you can see, right, with like the sporting type of martial arts and stuff like that, you have a younger type of, the younger type of people. You have some people that will kind of transfer into coaching and commentating, but it's a young man's game, really. So
I mean, that's a great point. Like, people will argue until they're blue in the face. I mean, the Aikido thing is actually a really hot topic right now, and
I was wondering, because it's like, all their positions they have, so
they're not based on sword work. They are inspired by a particular man's conception of what sword work might have been once upon a time.
That is the answer I was looking for. Thank you, Jared.
Sure thing. And I'm always at your service to go more in depth on that, since that is my jam. But as a folklorist, I also have to throw out there, to at some point, you know, we are as John Gottschall says, the storytelling animal. We use story. It's hardwired into our brain to tell stories because that's how we make sense of literally everything in life.
Yep.
We have to weave narrative, otherwise it doesn't work in our brains. And so at some point you have to kind of stop and say, well, yeah, he didn't survive a firing squad through his magical superpowers, but I choose to believe that anyway because it services me.
Okay.
And you know, it at some point it's that secondhand lions thing. Doesn't matter if it's true. Just because something's not true doesn't mean you can't believe it.
Right. Yeah. And also, you don't have to, and also belief, right? You don't have to believe necessarily in the stories. The stories aren't there to relate to you the actions and facts and events that took place during this event. No, they're there to teach you a lesson, right? What's that lesson? Right. So like
Is that kind of like pressure point fighting?
I'm talking about like the bird and the palm thing.
Oh, sorry.
You know what I mean?
Fist of the North Star.
Yeah, stuff like that. But you know the bird and the palm thing where they say, oh, it can't, the bird cannot fly up from the palm because every time he pushes up, I push down so it stays at the same, you know, like I said. Now, of course, that's not true. Any bird that's small enough to fit in your hand does not need to push off of anything to fly. So,
but then it gets into like what
is,
is the wind speed of an unladen swallow traveling?
Right,
yeah.
Right. The whole point is like be soft and try to neutralize force and stuff like that. But
right. Well, what is this?
Go ahead, Jared.
Sound of one hand clapping. You can either take the lesson or you can stand there for 3 hours and go.
Yep, and then you can get a PhD in that.
Yes.
And totally. So all my bitterness towards academics aside, I would like to, you know, I'd like to just like, okay, so I really have enjoyed our conversation about opening this gate. I guess my next question is with the people who are part of our organization and come to our organization from this discussion, what do we want to foster in their maybe their goals or their consciousness of how I want to ask them a question, if you understand my meaning. It's like, what do you see? What would you want out of us as TPLA and everyone part of it focusing on the open hand? And I think I want to throw that question out like on the apprentices board or whatever. It was like, what? And I think that comes from me.
Put it right in the comments, whatever. If you're watching this later and you come up with an idea, put it in the comments. We'll get them.
Yeah, and I think that's for me as a teacher, because coming back to the idea of, I mean, I was a performer. I mean, I went around the world as a performer, but you know what? That wasn't my dharma, man. I love to teach, and I love teaching these kids that I do. I love teaching kids awareness. It's not anything else but that. And it's true. It's like my passion is the arts, but my course is that of the teacher. Maybe similar. It sounds like I need to watch this Soul film that you're talking about. It's probably going to make me cry.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
Have a catharsis.
It's pretty rough.
It will. Yeah, definitely. It's great.
I'll check it out. I've just been busy. And so my question is to everyone out there, what do you need? What do you want? And what do you feel is important with letting go of the saber and focusing on the hand? All levels of expertise. Those of us who have gone through that process know what we want to say. But the people who are younger than us in the art, whatever that art may be, I think it's a good question to pose to them.
And feel free to be crazy. Like, you don't need to have the answers. That's why you're posing hypotheticals and asking questions. Anything that comes to your brain, we'll worry about figuring it out. Yeah,
have the courage to create.
Yeah,
Rollo May, courage to create, man.
Yeah. You come up with the wild theories first, and then you pare it down from there. You know, cast the wide net.
Right on.
Yep. All right. Well, looks like we're right exactly at the end of the hour here. So I think we could stop it there. We will obviously be coming back to this topic in the future, so watch out for that. We'll be doing some videos and all that kind of thing. So I'm there. So put your comments in the description here. If you follow us on Facebook, you can do there if you want to chime into any of this. Our Learners in Exile program and our Learners in Exile group on Facebook is still going. Our forum is still going. Connect with us in any way, that shape or form.
There's a few of us on TikTok too. Like
Yeah,
we're everywhere.
We are back now. We are going to be doing weekly shows for TPLA Live again. So yay. And we will be here Tuesday, May 4th for our May 4th extravaganza. We got Charlie Cummings from the Saber Legion, Carl Vaz, and Darth Alice. So plus all of the TPLA people that you're sick of seeing. But any hoot, we will leave you all there for today. Have a great day, everybody. Patience, practice, and perseverance, and happy sabering.